Welcome to this Tutor to You A Level Sociology revision blast for AQA A Level Sociology. In this video we're going to do a revision blast on global development, focusing on the aspects of global development. The specification points that we're going to look at in this revision blast are development in relation to aid and trade, industrialisation, urbanisation, the environment and war and conflict. And the last specification point, employment, education, health, demographic change and gender as aspects of development. For our first activity we're going to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 where we'll ask you to name 5 of something, 4 of something, 3 of something, 2 of something and 1 of something, and you'll have 2 minutes to do so. The 5 we're looking for are types of environmental issues impacting on development. The 4 are features of development that sociologists will study. 3 are the causes of conflict in the developing world. 2 different approaches to healthcare, and 1 theorist associated with population. You have 2 minutes to answer these questions. If you need any further time, please press pause, and that goes to any activity in this revision blast. 2 minutes starting now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Three, 2, 1.
And time is up. Let's look at the answers. 5 types of environmental issue impacting on development. Well, deforestation, desertification, air pollution, could also have had water pollution there, overpopulation and species extinction. 4 features of development that sociologists study. These are the aspects of development: employment, education, gender and health. Could also have had demographic change. Could have also had aid and trade. 3 causes of conflict in the developing world: poverty, identity politics and access to resources. 2 approaches to healthcare: well, modernisation view and people-centred views, which are favoured by Marxist and feminist viewpoints. And 1 theorist associated with population. You could have had Thomas Malthus here. I've gone with Ehrlich. Now for the 10-mark outline and explain questions, you usually have to make a link between 2 different parts of the specification. Here we're going to look at the relationship between gender and different aspects of development. So around our connection spinner, we have different aspects of development. So the relationship between gender and aid, gender and modernisation, gender and employment, gender and demographic change, gender and conflict, and gender and education. We're going to spin our spinner, and wherever it lands we need to make a connection between gender and that topic. So gender and demographic change. What might be the impact of gender differences on demographic change? Give you a couple of moments to think about that one before we reveal our answer. Think perhaps about how maybe women might be able to impact on demographic change. The role of males in looking at demographic change as well. Of course, it's always important when you're talking about gender not only to focus solely on women, but also on the impact on men. Let's look at our response. Well, the adoption of Western attitudes can help control overpopulation. This is through the introduction of things like contraception, or women becoming employed and getting a better education and therefore reducing the fertility window. It can also be women becoming more educated to look after children and therefore reducing infant mortality. Let's spin again. Again, the same 6 topics. And we're looking for a connection between gender and this topic area. The topic we're looking at is employment. So what might be the connection between gender and employment, and how can it help the process of development? Think about who is employed, who are they employed by? We could quite easily have changed that topic area to the relationship between TNCs and gender, for example. Our responses, well, we've gone with women being employed by TNCs. This has knock-on effects for things like demographic change, because if women are in employment, then it reduces the fertility window. We can also look at the way in which male labour is used in construction projects. Lots of aid used to be centred on employing men, particularly large-scale infrastructure developments, so things like hydroelectric dams, and these can have positive impacts on development. Our next activity is a bubble quiz. In the bubble quiz, the number of answers that are correct can range from 0 to all 4. So you'll have a question and you can have potentially between 0 and 4 correct answers. So our first question, which of the following do modernisation theorists believe is key to development? A. Deindustrialisation, B. People-centred approaches to health, C. Western-style education, or D. Gender equality. Remember, modernisation theory and Rostow follows very similar principles to functionalism. Our correct answers are C and D. Surprisingly, modernisation theorists believe that if women in the developing world start to act more like women in the Western world and become educated and gain employment, then this will help the process of development. They also look at Western style of education systems that transmit norms and values such as entrepreneurialism, individualism, and universal standards. Question number 2, which of the following are impacted by conflict in the developing world? A. Industrialisation, B. The environment, C. Trade, or D. Education. Which of those aspects of development are impacted by conflict in the developing world? Here you need to think about the impacts of conflict. So what might conflict cause disruption to? Our answers are all 4. Conflict can harm the process of industrialisation. Nations may not wish to invest in a country that is war-torn. It obviously has impacts on the environment, not only from things like unexploded munitions, but the movement and mass migration of refugees. It has impacts on trade. People are less likely to trade with nations that are in conflict, and it has impacts on the education system, particularly with the use of child soldiers in some parts of the world, and quite simply the disruption to the education system from conflict. TNCs can impact on which of the following aspects of development? A, education, B, gender, C, health, or D, employment. How might TNCs impact on development? And think about the types of TNCs that there may be in the developing world. Of course, there's between 0 and 4 correct answers here. Some may seem more obvious than others. Our correct answers, once again, are all 4. Education can be delivered through training programs, and also you can have large transnational corporations delivering educational provision. It has impacts on gender, particularly through hiring of male and female workers, and the conflict that may arise from hiring female workers from their male partners. TNCs can provide healthcare, particularly large pharmaceutical companies, and how that might impact on development. And of course, TNCs will also provide formal employment. Question number 4. Which of the following are reasons for over-urbanization? A, conflict, B, employment, C, gender, or D, environmental degradation? Why might there be over-urbanization, that is, massive growth of urban populations, which of course becomes an environmental pressure point? And the answers are A, B, and D. Conflict can mean people migrate to urban areas from rural areas where conflict may be taking place. Employment, of course, draws people towards the towns and cities. Process of urbanization and industrialization leads to massive geographical mobility. And environmental degradation, particularly things like desertification, where people are no longer able to use arable farmland and therefore move to the cities for employment. Question number 5. Which of the following are impacted by the process of industrialization? A, conflict, B, urbanization, C, environment, or D, employment? May have given you a little bit of a hint in the previous question. The process of industrialization is linked into which of these 4 factors? And the correct answer is B, C, and D. Urbanization and industrialization are closely linked because industrial centres tend to set up in city areas. There is obviously an impact on the environment of industrialization through things like water and air pollution. But also, particularly with agri-business development, you may have desertification and deforestation. And employment. As people move towards more formal employment, particularly in secondary sectors such as textiles in cities or in light manufacturing, this will impact on the levels of employment in a nation. Our next activity is a chili quiz. In the chili quiz, you have 30 seconds to answer 3 questions, and each question has a different level of difficulty as rated by the chili rankings below. We have green, which is mild, spicy, which is orange, and hot, which is red. You will have 30 seconds to answer the questions. And let's look at the questions. So which sociologist wrote about old wars and new wars? Which sociologist discussed the poverty trap in relation to conflict? And which Marxist was critical of the use of westernized healthcare? 30 seconds starting now. And time's up. So how did you do? There are answers. Which sociologist wrote about old wars and new wars? That was Mary Kaldor. Which sociologist discussed the poverty trap in relation to conflict? That was Collier. And which Marxist was critical of the use of westernised healthcare, suggesting that it was more important to fix the social factors that caused ill health first of all, and that was Navarro. Differences between westernised healthcare and healthcare in the developing world is that westernised healthcare tends to be centred on large hospitals in urban areas, whereas there are large rural populations in many parts of the developing world, and therefore it would be preferable to have smaller clinics spaced out so individuals could access them. Our final activity is a multiple choice quiz. Which sociological approach is critical of the use of Western education? Is it A, modernisation theory, B, dependency theory, C, neoliberalism, or D, feminism? There's at least one there that you may be able to rule out from our earlier questions. A, modernisation, B, dependency theory, C, neoliberal, D, feminism. The correct answer is B, dependency theory. Obviously, Marxist theory, very critical of the use of Western education because it suggests that it embeds values that are linked into capitalism and also is seen as being a part of cultural imperialism. What term is given to overfarming of land so that it becomes infertile? Is it A, deindustrialisation, B, deforestation, C, degradation, or D, desertification? And our answer is D, desertification. Question number 3. Which of the following sociologists suggests that urbanisation helps transmit Western ideas? Was it A, Adamson, B, Frank, C, Hoselitz, or D, Malthus? Now, of course, many of those may have said that at one point in time, but the one who's most famous for saying that was Bert Hoselitz. Talked about how the city can be a staging ground for the transmission of Western ideas. Question number 4. What term is given to the Marxist alternative to trade by creating their own goods instead of buying them from overseas? Is it A, import substitution industrialisation, B, deindustrialisation, C, free trade, or D, degrowth? And the answer is A, import substitution industrialisation, one of two ways in which dependency or Marxist theories suggested that nations can trade their way out of debt. The other one was export orientated production. And what do many developing nations create to attract TNCs? Is it A, enterprise free zones, B, tariffs, C, structural adjustment policies, or D, trade liberalisation? Of course, this links in with our questions on trade. And the correct answer is A, enterprise free zones. These are areas with lower levels of taxation, can pay lower wages than you would get in the West, and often circumnavigate some employment laws and legislation in that nation, which enables TNCs to assemble goods relatively cheaply and then ship them off overseas for consumption. That concludes this Tutor to You A-Level Sociology revision blast on global development, looking at aspects of global development from the AQA A-Level specification. Thanks for watching.